something remarkable. No species has ever forced the Empire to surrender. "We didn't force you to surrender," Parker replied. "We forced you to realize that some people would rather die than live as your slaves. Ambassador Kethril warned us about your species. We should have listened." Parker looked around the chamber at the symbols of Imperial power. "Yes, you should have. But you made the same mistake that all bullies make. You thought everyone else was as afraid of death as you are. And now? Now you're going to learn what it means to live in a galaxy where no one has to bow to you any—" Jake Morrison stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Council, his hands behind his back as he watched the alien delegates argue. The massive chamber stretched up for hundreds of feet, its walls covered in gold and silver patterns that hurt human eyes to look at for too long. Beings from across the galaxy sat in floating chairs that moved through the air like bubbles. The Zephyrian delegate, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, was speaking in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "The humans must fix this problem immediately. We demand action within 1 standard day." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. For the past 6 hours, the Council had been blaming Earth for the mess on Centauri Prime. The fact that it was the Zephyrians who had caused the entire disaster seemed to mean nothing to anyone in the room. Lisa Chang, the human trade representative, sat beside him with her tablet showing the real numbers. Earth had lost 47 ships in the rescue operation. 3,000 human workers had died trying to save alien lives. The economic cost would take Earth decades to recover from. And now the Council wanted to fine humanity for interfering with Zephyrian operations. "Ambassador Morrison, the Council," Speaker said, its voice coming from a floating crystal that changed colors as it spoke. "Does Earth accept responsibility for this unauthorized intervention?" Morrison stood up slowly. Behind him, he could hear Carl Bennett, the military liaison, shifting in his seat. The man had lost his son in the Centauri rescue operation. His boy had been just 22 years old, fresh out of the academy, eager to help save lives. "Unauthorized intervention?" Morrison said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "We received a distress call from 12 billion beings who were about to die. We responded as any civilized species would." The Krillian war chief, a massive creature covered in what looked like living metal, made a sound like grinding gears. "Humans always interfere. You think you know better than your superiors." Morrison had heard this before. For 300 years, humanity had been treated like the galaxy's repair crew. When wars ended, humans cleaned up the mess. When trade routes failed, humans fixed them. When disasters struck, humans were the first to respond and the last to leave. And what did they get for it? Insults, blame, treatment like they were nothing more than useful animals. "The Zephyrian mining operation destabilized an entire star system," Lisa Chang said, standing up with her tablet in hand. "Our ships prevented a supernova that would have killed everything within 50 light-years. The Zephyrian delegate's skin shifted from blue to angry red. "The mining operation was perfectly safe. Human interference caused the instability." Morrison almost laughed. The Zephyrians had been using quantum drilling techniques that any first-year human physics student could have told them were dangerous. But asking humans for advice was beneath them. Better to risk billions of lives than admit they needed help. "From the lower species, Captain Martinez's report clearly shows," Carl Bennett started to say. "We do not recognize human reports," the Krillian war chief interrupted. "Human data is unreliable." That was it. Morrison felt something break inside his chest. Roy Martinez had commanded the human rescue fleet. The man had worked for 72 hours straight, personally piloting ships into collapsing space to save alien families. His engineering officer, Nina Rodriguez, had figured out how to stabilize the quantum reaction that the Zephyrians had started. Dr. Alex Turner had treated thousands of injured aliens with no thought for his own safety. And now, these creatures were calling their reports unreliable. Morrison looked around the chamber. The Andromedans sat in their corner, saying nothing as always. The Vorthans were busy with their trade calculations, caring only about profit margins. The smaller species stayed quiet, afraid to anger the big powers. Not one of them had said thank you. Not one had acknowledged that humans had just saved half the sector from destruction. "The Council has decided," the speaker announced. "Earth will pay reparations to the Zephyrian Empire for interference with their lawful operations. The amount is set at 5 trillion galactic credits." Morrison heard Lisa Chang gasp behind him. 5 trillion credits was more than Earth's total economic output for 10 years. It would bankrupt human civilization. Furthermore, the speaker continued, Earth's fleet movements will be restricted for the next century. All human ships must receive Council approval before leaving their home system. Prison. They were putting humanity in prison for saving lives. Morrison looked at the aliens around him. Some were nodding with approval. Others looked bored, as if this was just another routine matter. The Zephyrian delegate was making happy clicking sounds. These beings had been in space for millions of years. They had technologies that could reshape reality itself. They controlled resources from 1,000 worlds, and they were threatened by a species that had only been in space for 3 centuries. No, Morrison realized, they weren't threatened. They were lazy. Humans did the hard work, solved the difficult problems, took the dangerous jobs. The aliens had grown comfortable letting the inferior species handle anything that required real effort. Morrison had been humanity's voice in this chamber for 15 years. He had begged, argued, and pleaded for fair treatment. He had watched human heroes be dismissed and human sacrifices be ignored. He had swallowed his pride 1,000 times in the hope that things would get better. They never did. They only got worse. Morrison walked to the center of the chamber. The floating chairs moved aside as he approached the speaker's platform. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. Earth rejects these demands, he said clearly. The chamber fell silent. Even the humming of the gravity generator seemed to stop. Furthermore, Morrison continued, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Now there was noise. Clicking, hissing, grinding sounds filled the air as aliens argued in dozens of languages. The speaker's crystal flashed angry red colors. "You cannot simply leave," the Krillian war chief rumbled. "The Council does not permit it." Morrison smiled for the first time in years. "You're not listening. We're not asking for permission. We're done." He turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa Chang and Carl Bennett followed him, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and relief that Morrison felt in his chest. "You need us," the Zephyrian delegate called after them. "Humans cannot survive alone." Morrison stopped at the chamber doors. He looked back at the assembly of aliens who had treated his species like servants for 3 centuries. "You're right," he said. "Someone does need someone else. You're just wrong about who needs who." The doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the ESS Freedom, watching the tactical display show hundreds of green dots moving across space. Each dot represented a human ship following her orders to abandon their positions across the galaxy. "Admiral, we're getting confirmation signals from all sectors," reported Communications Officer Maya Johnson. "Operation Exodus is proceeding on schedule." Sullivan nodded but kept her eyes on the display. 3 centuries of human presence in galactic space was ending in just 72 hours. Every research station, every trade depot, every embassy was being evacuated or shut down. "Ma'am, Captain Parker is requesting permission to delay his departure from Vega Station," Maya said. "He says there are still human civilians who want to stay." "Negative," Sullivan replied without hesitation. "No one stays behind. Every human citizen returns to Sol space immediately." She had been clear in her orders to all ship commanders. This was not a partial withdrawal or a negotiating tactic. Humanity was cutting all ties with the galactic community. Anyone who stayed would be on their own, and Sullivan was not going to abandon anyone to alien mercy. On Kepler Station, Dr. Susan Wright was overseeing the shutdown of the Human Research Consortium. Her team had been working on 47 different joint scientific projects with alien species, projects that could have led to cures for diseases, solutions to energy problems, or new technologies that would benefit everyone. Doctor, the Andromedan Science Council is asking us to at least finish the quantum biology study, said her assistant, Dr. Peter Kim. We're only weeks away from a breakthrough. Wright looked at the data screens showing months of work. The quantum biology project could revolutionize medicine across the galaxy. But the Andromedans had never treated human scientists as equals. They used human research and then published the results under alien names. Shut it down, Wright said. All of it. And make sure we take every bit of our data with us. She walked to the master console and began entering her authorization codes. One by one, the research labs went dark. Experiments that had run for years suddenly stopped. Data that aliens had been expecting to receive was encrypted and marked for transport. To Earth, Dr. Kim watched the screens go black. They're going to be furious when they find out what we were working on. Wright smiled grimly. They should have thought of that before they decided we were just lab assistants. In the medical sector of Proxima Base, Dr. Alex Turner was packing up equipment that had saved thousands of alien lives. The base hospital was the best medical facility in this part of the galaxy, entirely staffed and run by humans. Nurse manager Linda Davis was helping patients transfer to alien medical facilities. Most of the aliens looked confused and frightened. Human medical technology was generations ahead of anything else in the galaxy, and human doctors had developed treatments that alien physicians had never dreamed of. "Dr. Turner," said a Zephyrian, patient, its blue skin pale with illness. "Will the replacement doctors know how to treat my condition?" Turner looked at the patient's chart. The Zephyrian had a rare genetic disorder that would be fatal without the specialized treatment Turner had developed. No alien doctor would know how to replicate the procedure. "I'm sorry," Turner said honestly. "I cannot stay to train anyone else." The Zephyrian's eyes filled with what looked like tears. "But I will die without treatment." Turner felt his heart break a little. This was the hardest part of the withdrawal. Innocent beings would suffer because of their government's arrogance. But staying would only delay the inevitable. The Galactic Council had made it clear that humans were not welcome as equals. "I can give you the treatment protocol," Turner said. "Your doctors will have to learn quickly." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Human trade stations that had managed commerce between different species were going silent. Merchant T. Captain Tony Rodriguez was supervising the evacuation of Gamma Trading Post, a facility that handled 30% of the sector's interstellar commerce. "Captain, the Vorthan Trade Collective is demanding that we stay open," reported Freight Coordinator Amy Thompson. "They say closing the station violates our contracts." Rodriguez laughed bitterly. "The same contracts they've been trying to break? For years? The ones that pay us a fraction of what our work is worth?" He looked out at the massive cargo ships waiting to dock. Ships carrying goods between worlds that had never learned to trade directly with each other. The humans had been the middlemen, the translators, the ones who made sure everyone got what they needed. "Let them figure out their own supply chains," Rodriguez said. "We're done being their unpaid logistics department. The evacuation was not just about people and equipment." Communications Officer Maya Johnson was coordinating the shutdown of the Galactic Communication Network's human-maintained components. What the aliens did not know was that humans had quietly become essential to keeping their technology working. "Maya, we're getting panic signals from 17 different species," reported her technician, Chris Martinez. "Their communication arrays are already starting to fail." Maya checked her console. The Galactic Communication Network looked simple. From the outside, but it relied on quantum resonance frequencies that only human technicians fully understood. The aliens had the basic technology, but humans had figured out how to make it actually work reliably. "Not our problem anymore," Maya said, though she felt bad about it. "Shut down our relay stations and let them manage their own communications." On Earth, the news of humanity's withdrawal was being met with mixed reactions. President Patricia Kennedy was in emergency session with her cabinet, planning for the huge number of refugees who would be returning home. "We're talking about 40 million people," said Colonial Administrator Maria Santos. "They'll need housing, jobs, integration into Earth's economy." "We'll manage," Kennedy said firmly. "Humanity survived for thousands of years without alien help. We can do it again." Agricultural Director Kevin Walsh was already working on expanding food production. "Actually, Madam President, this might be a blessing in disguise. We've been sending our best resources off-world for centuries. Having all that talent and energy focused on human space could be incredible for our development." Meanwhile, military, engineer Brandon Lee was designing new defensive systems for Sol space. If the aliens decided to force humanity back into the galactic community, Earth needed to be ready. "We're going to turn this solar system into a fortress," Lee told Admiral Sullivan during a secure communication. "Any alien ship that comes here uninvited is going to get a very unpleasant surprise." The alien response to humanity's withdrawal was mixed. Some species celebrated, claiming that the inferior humans had finally accepted their proper place. The Krillian war chief issued a statement saying that the galaxy was better off without human interference. But some aliens were worried. The Andromedan Science Council realized that their most productive research partnerships had involved human scientists. The Vorthan Trade Collective was scrambling to find new ways to manage their supply chains, and in the shadows, a few alien leaders were quietly calculating what humanity's departure really meant. They had been in space for millions of years, but somehow a young species had become essential to galactic civilization in just 3 centuries. Maybe the humans had a point. Maybe the galaxy needed them more than anyone wanted to admit, but it was too late for second thoughts. Humanity was going home, and they were making it clear that they had no intention of coming back. 3 months after humanity left the galactic community, the first cracks began to show. Communications Officer Zexval of the Krillian Empire was staring at his console in confusion. The galactic communication network was failing in ways that made no sense. Messages that should have taken minutes to transmit were taking hours. Some communications were getting completely lost in space. "Engineer Thoxmar," Zexval called to his technical specialist. "The quantum resonance frequencies are becoming unstable again." Thoxmar looked at the readings and made frustrated clicking sounds. "I have run every diagnostic procedure in our database. The equipment appears to be functioning normally." This was the 3rd major communication failure this week. The Krillian military was having trouble coordinating their fleet movements. Trade negotiations with other species were being delayed because messages were not getting through. Even basic diplomatic communications were becoming unreliable. "Perhaps we should contact the human technicians who used to maintain," Zexval started to suggest. "Absolutely not," Thoxmar interrupted. "We are a superior species. We do not need help from humans." But privately, Thoxmar was worried. He had studied the communication network's technical specifications, but there were aspects of the quantum resonance system that seemed to require knowledge that Krillian science had not developed. The humans had somehow made improvements to the network that no one had documented. On Space Station Gamma 7, Station Commander Velthor was dealing with a more immediate crisis. The station's life support systems were failing, and his engineering team could not figure out why. "Commander, the bioatmospheric processors are shutting down one by one," reported Chief Engineer Nixtar. "If we lose life support completely, we will have to evacuate 17 different species." Velthor looked at the technical readouts. Gamma 7 was a crucial refueling station that served ships from across the galaxy. Losing it would disrupt trade routes and military operations throughout the sector. What do the maintenance records show? Velthor asked. Nixtar pulled up the files on his screen. The processors were designed and installed by human engineers 5 years ago. The original specifications show a standard atmospheric recycling system, but the actual implementation appears to be far more complex. The truth was becoming clear. The human engineer Rachel Moore had not just installed a basic life support system, she had created something that could handle the atmospheric requirements of dozens of different species simultaneously. The aliens had assumed it was simple technology, but they were wrong. Can we replicate the human modifications? Velthor asked. Not without understanding the underlying bio-atmospheric chemistry, Nixtar admitted. The humans seem to have developed techniques that are beyond our current knowledge. Within 6 hours, Gamma-7 had to be evacuated. 17 different species nearly suffocated before emergency ships could rescue them. The station that had operated perfectly for 5 years was now a dead hulk floating in space. The medical crisis hit even harder. On Andromeda Prime, the Nexus plague was spreading faster than anyone had expected. The disease affected 12 different alien species, and the death toll was climbing every day. Dr. Zix Andra, the head of Andromedan medicine, was studying the latest casualty reports with growing panic. The infection rate has increased by 40% in the last week, she told her staff. Our current treatments are not working. The Andromedans had been working on plague treatments for decades, but they had never made real progress. Then, Dr. Elizabeth Carter had arrived with her human medical team. In just 2 years, Carter had developed treatments that actually worked. She had understood something about the plague's biology that had escaped Andromedan scientists for generations. What? About Dr. Carter's research? Asked Dr. Mixinol. She was close to developing a cure before the humans left. Dr. Zixandra checked her files. The humans took all their research data with them. We have only the basic treatment protocols they left behind, and those are not enough to stop the current outbreak. The plague was spreading to other worlds, now. Species that had never worked together were suddenly faced with a common threat that they could not handle alone. The human medical knowledge that could have saved millions of lives was locked away in Sol space, behind defensive barriers that no alien ship could penetrate. On Vorthan Prime, Trade Minister Kolvex was looking at economic reports that made his stomach hurt. The galactic economy was beginning to collapse. Minister, we have lost contact with 47% of our trade routes, reported economic analyst Devara. Supply chains that have operated for centuries are completely broken. Kolvex studied the data. The problem was not just that human trade stations had closed. The problem was that humans had been managing supply chains in ways that other species had never understood. They had developed logistics systems, solved transportation problems, and created economic relationships that held the galaxy together. What about the shipping routes through the Kepler sector? Kolvex asked. Completely shut down, Devara replied. It turns out that human logistics coordinator Sam Williams was managing 73% of the intersystem shipping in that entire region. Without his coordination system, cargo ships are getting lost, schedules are falling apart, and worlds are running out of basic supplies. The Vorthons had always thought of humans as simple traders, useful for handling the boring details of commerce. Now they were realizing that those boring details were what made galactic civilization possible. Military problems were mounting too. Admiral Zexthor of the Krillian War Fleet was discovering that his ships could not operate without constant maintenance from human technicians. Admiral, we have lost another 3 destroyers to engine failures, reported Fleet Engineer Warnox. The quantum drive systems are breaking down faster than we can repair them. Zexthor looked at his fleet status reports. Ships that had operated perfectly for decades were suddenly suffering mysterious breakdowns. Weapon systems were failing, navigation computers were producing errors, even basic life support was becoming unreliable. What changed? Zexthor demanded. These ships were fine 3 months ago. Warnox looked uncomfortable. Sir, It appears that human maintenance crews were making repairs and improvements that we were not aware of. They were solving problems before we knew the problems existed. The truth was humiliating. The proud Krillian military had been dependent on human technicians to keep their own ships working. The humans had quietly fixed thousands of small problems, upgraded systems, and prevented failures that would have crippled the fleet. "Can we train our own technicians to do this work?" Zexthor asked. "Not quickly," Warnox admitted. "The humans seem to understand our technology better than we do. Even worse, the aliens were discovering that many of their greatest technological achievements had been secretly improved by human contributions. The Zephyrian quantum drives only worked because human physicist Dr. Helen Rodriguez had solved critical stability equations. The Andromedan medical scanners relied on algorithms developed by human programmers. The Vorthon trade computers used human-designed software that had never been officially documented. On the Galactic Council Station, Council Speaker Quxthol was receiving reports from across the galaxy. The news was all bad. Communication failures, medical crises, economic collapse, military breakdowns. Everywhere, systems that had worked perfectly for centuries were falling apart. "Speaker, we are receiving emergency requests for assistance from 47 member species," reported Council Coordinator Jixavel. "They are asking us to contact the humans and request their return." Quxthol's crystal form flickered with angry colors. "We will not beg for help from an inferior species. The problems are temporary. Our superior technologies will adapt." But privately, Quxthol was beginning to understand the scope of the crisis. Humanity had not just been doing maintenance work and simple tasks. They had been holding galactic civilization together in ways that no one had realized. The aliens had thought they were the teachers and humans were the students. They were discovering that it had been the other way around all along, and the humans were gone, leaving the galaxy to face the consequences of 3 centuries of arrogance and contempt. 6 months after humanity's departure, galactic civilization was in free fall. Trade Minister Kolvex stood in his office on Vorthon Prime, watching cargo ships drift helplessly through space on his viewing screen. Without human logistics coordinators, the ships had no idea where to go or what to carry. Captains who had relied on human-designed route planning were lost between the stars. "Minister, we've lost another major shipping route," reported his aide, Devara. "The Centauri-Vega trade corridor has completely collapsed. Ships are running out of fuel with no way to reach their destinations." Kolvex felt sick. The Vorthon. Trade Collective had controlled commerce across half the galaxy for thousands of years. Now they could barely manage trade within their own solar system. "What about Emergency Protocol 7? Kolvex asked desperately. Devara looked at her tablet. "That protocol was designed by human analysts 3 years ago. We never learned how it actually works." The bitter truth was everywhere Kolvex looked. Shipping schedules created by human mathematicians, trade agreements negotiated by human diplomats, economic models built by human economists. For centuries, the Vorthons had taken credit for human work, dismissing their contributions as simple labor. Now, without human expertise, the galactic economy was collapsing faster than anyone could measure. On Krillian battlecruiser Dominator, Admiral Zexthor was dealing with his own nightmare. His flagship, the pride of the Krillian war fleet, was barely functional. "Admiral, we've lost main engines," reported Chief Engineer Warnox. "The quantum drive core is producing critical errors that our technicians cannot understand." Zexthor looked around his bridge. Half the control stations were dark. The weapon systems had failed 2 days ago. Life support was running on backup. Power that would not last much longer. "How is this possible?" Zexthor demanded. "This ship was built by the finest Krillian engineers." Warnox pulled up maintenance records on his screen. "Sir, I've been reviewing the technical logs. It appears that human maintenance teams were making thousands of small modifications and repairs that were never officially documented." They were preventing problems that we never knew existed. The Admiral felt his pride crumble. For decades, human technicians had been crawling through Krillian ships, fixing things that Krillian engineers could not even identify as broken. Chief Mechanic Julie Foster had personally maintained the Dominator's quantum drives. Systems analyst Greg Thompson had designed backup protocols that kept the ship running during combat. The Krillians had thought the humans were just cleaning staff. In reality, they had been the only ones keeping the mighty war fleet operational. Can we reverse engineer their modifications? Zexthor asked. Not without completely rebuilding every system, Warnox admitted. The humans integrated their improvements so deeply into our technology that separating them would require knowledge we do not possess. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of Krillian warships. The most powerful military force in galactic history was becoming a fleet of drifting hulks. The medical crisis was even worse. On Andromeda Prime, Dr. Zixandra was watching patients die from diseases that should have been easily treatable. "Doctor, we've lost another 40 patients to the Nexus Plague," reported Nurse Vixnell. "The alien treatments are not working, and we're running out of options." Dr. Zixandra looked at the medical data that Dr. Elizabeth Carter had left behind. The human doctor had been developing revolutionary treatments based on something she called biosystemic integration therapy. The basic concept made sense, but the implementation required medical knowledge that Andromedan science had not developed. "What about the treatment protocols Dr. Carter gave us?" Dr. Zixandra asked. "We're following them exactly, but they only work for early-stage infections," Vixnell replied. "For advanced cases, Dr. Carter was developing something entirely new, something that required understanding of human biochemistry that we do not have." The irony was devastating. The Andromedans had dismissed human medicine as primitive and crude. Now they were discovering that human doctors understood biological systems in ways that had taken Andromedan science millions of years to develop, and the knowledge that could save millions of lives was locked away in human space, protected by defensive systems that no alien fleet could penetrate. The communication network failures were getting worse every day. On the Galactic Council station, Communications Director Jix Vell was trying to coordinate emergency meetings between species that could no longer talk to each other reliably. "Director, we've lost all contact with the Outer Rim territories," reported Technician Bixtar. "The quantum resonance cascade has spread to 17 different sectors." Jixvel studied the network status displays. Red warning lights were appearing across the galaxy as communication relays failed one by one. The network that had connected thousands of worlds for centuries was falling apart. "Can we rebuild the failed relays?" Jixvel asked. Bixtar looked at the technical specifications. "The original designs are simple enough, but the humans made modifications that we cannot understand. They somehow solved problems with quantum interference that our best scientists have been working on for thousands of years. The humans had not just maintained the communication network, they had quietly improved it in ways that made galactic civilization possible. Without their constant adjustments and upgrades, the network was reverting to its original, barely functional state. Species that had been in contact for millennia were suddenly isolated, unable to coordinate responses to the growing crisis. But the worst discovery was yet to come. On Zephyrian Prime, Chief Scientist Velmar was reviewing the technical specifications for their famous quantum drive technology. What he found made his blood run cold. "This is impossible," Velmar said to his research team. "The stability equations that make our drives work were solved by human physicist Dr. Helen Rodriguez 3 years ago." His assistant, Dr. Nexathira, looked at the data files. "But sir, we published those equations as Zephyrian discoveries. We received the Galactic Science Prize for them." Velmar felt sick. The Zephyrians had built their reputation on quantum drive technology that they had never actually understood. Dr. Rodriguez had solved the critical problems and quietly shared her work, allowing the Zephyrians to take full credit. Without these human equations, do our drives actually work? Velmar asked. Dr. Nexathira ran the calculations. No, sir. Without Dr. Rodriguez's stability solutions, the quantum drives would explode within minutes of activation. The Zephyrian Empire's entire space fleet was powered by technology they had stolen from humans and never bothered to understand. Every ship in their navy was a potential bomb that could detonate at any moment. Similar discoveries were being made across the galaxy. The Andromedan medical scanners only worked because of algorithms written by human programmers. The Vorthan economic cell models relied on mathematical techniques developed by human mathematicians. The Krillian weapon systems used targeting software created by human engineers. For 3 centuries, alien species had been taking credit for human innovations while treating humans like inferior servants. Now they were discovering that their entire civilization was built on human knowledge. Council Speaker Quxthol was receiving emergency reports from every corner of the galaxy. Governments were collapsing, economies were crashing, military forces were becoming non-operational, medical systems were failing. Speaker, we are facing the complete breakdown of galactic civilization, reported Council Coordinator Jixvel. 17 species have declared states of emergency. 43 worlds have lost basic infrastructure. The death toll is approaching 1 billion beings. Quxthol's crystal form flickered with desperate colors. What are our options? The only solution is to convince the humans to return, Jixvel said quietly. We need their knowledge, their skills, their expertise. Without them, galactic civilization will not survive. The proud alien leaders who had dismissed humanity as an inferior species were facing the ultimate humiliation. They needed to beg for help from the beings they had treated as servants. But first, they had to swallow their pride and admit the truth. The galaxy had not been ruled by superior alien species. It had been held together by human ingenuity, human dedication, and human knowledge. And the humans were gone, watching from soul space as their former masters finally learned what they had lost.